Let me ask you something you probably don't say out loud. Have you ever been in a room full of people, smiling, nodding, laughing, and felt completely invisible? Have you ever had 100 notifications on your phone, but felt like no one really sees you? Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, I don't even know who I am anymore? That feeling, the heaviness in your chest, the ache in your gut, the silence that follows you no matter how loud your life gets, that's loneliness. And it's not just about being alone. In fact, you can be surrounded by people and still feel it, loud, constant, crushing, because loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of connection. And here's the truth no one really says out loud. The connection you're missing isn't out there, it starts inside you. You've been told to hustle harder, to stay busy, to fill the silence with noise and scrolls and endless small talk. You've been taught that needing people makes you weak, that vulnerability is risky, that solitude is something to be ashamed of. But what if the real problem isn't that you're alone? What if the real problem is that you've disconnected from yourself? This isn't about fixing you, because you're not broken. This is about helping you remember what wholeness feels like. It's about rebuilding the most important relationship in your life, the one with you. Because once you do that, the loneliness begins to fade, the noise starts to quiet, and the people who are meant for you finally have a chance to find you. Let's talk about the truth behind being alone. Let's talk about masks, healing, presence, and what it really means to feel seen, not just by others, but by yourself. When you feel lonely, the instinct is to look outside yourself for a solution. You might scroll endlessly through social media, hoping to feel less alone by seeing what everyone else is doing. You might text someone you don't really care about just to feel like someone is out there. You might even go out, surround yourself with people, and still feel that empty ache in your chest, the silence that follows you home no matter how loud your environment gets. That's because loneliness isn't really about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected from yourself. We've been taught to believe that loneliness is a numbers game. Not enough friends, not in a relationship, don't have plans on a Friday night. We assume that if we just had more people, more texts, more followers, more attention, that emptiness would disappear. But it doesn't, because you could have 1 million followers and still feel invisible. You could be married and feel like a ghost in your own home. You could walk into a room full of friends and feel like a stranger. That's because the core of loneliness isn't about presence, it's about connection. And the first connection that breaks is the one you have with yourself. At some point, you stopped listening to yourself. Maybe it happened slowly, so gradually that you didn't even notice it. Maybe you started compromising little things, ignoring gut feelings, silencing your instincts to fit in. You laughed when you didn't feel like laughing, said yes when you meant no, posted things you didn't care about just for likes. Over time, you lost the rhythm of your own voice, and when you stop hearing yourself, you start feeling invisible, even when people are looking right at you. This disconnection becomes a habit. You get so used to looking outward for validation, attention, distractions, that it feels unbearable to sit alone. But that's exactly where the answer is. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. When you're truly connected to yourself, being alone can be peaceful, even powerful. It's in that quiet space where you start hearing your thoughts again, remembering who you are when no one else is watching. You begin to notice what you actually enjoy, what you need, what you've been neglecting. The relationship you build with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship in your life. If you're disconnected from your core, every interaction will feel shallow, even if it looks perfect from the outside. We try to fix loneliness by changing our environment, but the real shift has to happen internally. You can't connect deeply with others if you're not grounded in who you are. That dissonance is what creates that hollow feeling, even in the middle of a crowd. The truth is, the antidote to loneliness isn't more people, it's more presence. And you can't be present in your own life if you're constantly abandoning yourself for the sake of acceptance, performance, or distraction. This is the truth most people don't want to face. You are responsible for the relationship you have with yourself. No one can fix it for you. There's no external rescue coming. You're not broken, but you've been neglecting the most important connection you have, that inner voice, the one you've ignored for so long. It's still there, waiting. You don't have to fix everything at once. Start by paying attention. Sit with your discomfort instead of numbing it. Be honest about what you feel, even when it's ugly, especially when it's ugly. Stop pretending to be okay when you're not. It's exhausting, and it's a lie. Loneliness is a signal. It's not proof that you're unlovable or that something's wrong with you. It's a message from your inner self trying to get your attention, trying to remind you that you've drifted away from your own truth. When you ignore that message, it gets louder. It shows up as anxiety, depression, burnout, numbness. But if you listen, really listen, it becomes your guide back to yourself. Reconnecting with yourself doesn't mean you isolate from others. It means you finally show up in your life with your full self, your weirdness, your realness, your pain, your passion. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, you stop tolerating relationships that require you to hide. You stop begging for scraps of attention, and you start seeking out people who value what's real. But that only happens when you start showing up real first. We often mistake digital interaction for real connection, and it's silently isolating us. The modern world has given us tools that promise to keep us connected at all times: social media platforms, messaging apps, constant notifications buzzing in our pockets. And on the surface, it seems like we're more connected than ever. You can send a meme across the world in seconds, comment on someone's photo in real time, or post an update and get likes from people you haven't spoken to in years. But here's the truth we don't want to admit. Most of that interaction is shallow. It's surface level, it's curated, filtered, performative, and instead of filling us up, it slowly drains us. Because it's not connection, it's consumption. You scroll through hundreds of posts a day, watching snapshots of other people's lives. But how often do you actually feel anything? There's a numbness that creeps in. You laugh at a funny video, but it disappears from your mind 5 seconds later. You like someone's picture, but you haven't heard their actual voice in months. You respond to a message with an emoji instead of a real thought, and after hours of this digital activity, you put your phone down and feel emptier. You start asking yourself why you still feel lonely when you've talked to dozens of people that day. It's because what you're doing isn't nourishing. It's noise, it's static, and the brain, the heart, the soul, they all crave something more than that. There's a huge difference between being seen and being known. Social media might make you visible, but it doesn't make you known. You can share a perfectly edited photo, type out a clever caption, even get dozens of comments, but none of it means that someone understands you. None of it means someone is sitting with you in your truth, in your silence, in your messy, real, unfiltered self. And without that kind of recognition, you can feel completely invisible, even while being watched by hundreds of people. That's the paradox of digital connection. It gives the illusion of closeness while keeping us emotionally distant. We've learned to curate our lives instead of living them. When you're constantly thinking about how something will look on Instagram, you stop being present in the moment. You're not tasting your coffee, you're photographing it, you're not listening to your friend, you're checking if your story views are going up. And this constant splitting of attention keeps us from ever going deep. We don't have real conversations because we're afraid of awkwardness, vulnerability, silence. We replace them with double taps and emojis. But those quick digital exchanges can't hold the weight of real emotions. They're too light, too fast, too fleeting, and this shallow interaction becomes the standard. We start to accept it as enough. We convince ourselves that connection means sending memes back and forth or reacting to stories. We don't call, we don't show up. We stop asking, "How are you really?" because we know the answer might take time, and time feels scarce when our attention is being pulled in 1,000 directions. We're so overstimulated that we've become undernourished. We're so plugged in that we've become disconnected. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly. At first, it's just a habit, checking your phone out of boredom. Then it becomes avoidance. You stop reaching out to people in real life because online is easier. Less vulnerable, more controlled. You can type and delete. You can filter. You can choose who sees what version of you, and little by little, your real social muscles weaken. You forget how to sit in a room and just be with someone, eye to eye, with nothing between you. You forget how to listen without a screen, and even worse, you forget how to be alone without distraction. That's the real cost, because the longer you rely on digital interaction to meet your emotional needs, the more disconnected you become from yourself. You stop checking in with what you feel. You stop noticing what you need, what hurts, what matters. Your inner world gets quieter while the outer noise gets louder. And eventually, you start confusing attention for affection, likes for love, messages for meaning. But your heart knows the difference, it always has, and that ache you feel after hours online, that's the part of you that remembers what real connection feels like, and is still waiting for it. Rebuilding your relationship with solitude is the fastest way to kill loneliness. That might sound counterintuitive at first. When you're feeling lonely, the natural impulse is to reach out, to fill the space with people, noise, distractions, anything that can make the emptiness feel less sharp. We've been conditioned to believe that solitude is something to avoid, something reserved for people who are isolated or broken or unwanted. But the truth is, solitude isn't the cause of loneliness, it's the cure. The kind of loneliness that eats at you, that gnaws at your sense of worth, doesn't come from being physically alone. It comes from feeling disconnected, even when you're with others, and no amount of external company can fix that internal void. You can keep running from yourself, filling your calendar, surrounding yourself with people, but until you learn to be with yourself, truly be with yourself, you'll always feel alone, no matter who's around. Solitude is not the same thing as isolation. Isolation is what happens when you're cut off from connection. Solitude is what happens when you choose to connect with yourself. It's intentional, it's grounded. It's quiet but not empty. It's the space where you remember who you are when you're not performing for anyone, when you're not reacting, pleasing, hustling, posting, or pretending. Just you, raw, unfiltered, unedited. And for a lot of people, that moment is terrifying because it forces you to face everything you've been avoiding. Most of us have spent years trying to escape ourselves. We fill our days with noise because silence is uncomfortable. We check our phones 100 times a day because stillness feels unbearable. But when you finally stop running and sit in your own presence, something powerful happens. At first, it might be hard. The thoughts you've buried start to surface. The feelings you've numbed start to speak. You might feel restless, sad, anxious, even bored, but this is part of the process, because beneath all of that discomfort is the real you, waiting to be acknowledged, understood, healed. Rebuilding your relationship with solitude means making peace with yourself. It means learning to enjoy your own company, not just tolerate it. It means rediscovering what brings you joy, what lights you up, what quiets your mind and opens your heart. You start doing things not because they look good to others, but because they feel good to you. You walk without your phone, you sit in silence, you journal, you paint, you breathe, you eat alone without shame. You stop filling space just to avoid being with yourself, and instead you begin to cherish that space and something shifts. Slowly, the anxiety begins to lift, the restlessness settles, you begin to hear your own thoughts again, and trust them. You begin to feel your own emotions, and accept them. You begin to meet your own needs. Instead of outsourcing them, you become a safe place for yourself, and when that happens, the grip of loneliness starts to loosen. Because you're no longer dependent on others to validate your worth. You're no longer chasing connection out of desperation. You're no longer trying to be seen, because you finally see yourself. This inner grounding transforms the way you show up in the world. Relationships become a choice, not a crutch. You stop tolerating half-hearted connections, surface-level conversations, people who don't meet you with the same depth you've learned to give yourself. You don't need to chase anyone, because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You've turned solitude from a punishment into a practice, into power, into peace. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's a daily decision to sit with your own silence, to resist the urge to escape it, to find beauty in your own presence, and with time that presence becomes enough. You realize that the fear of being alone was never really about being alone. It was about being alone with yourself and not liking who you found. But now you're rebuilding that relationship, and the more you connect with who you truly are, the less lonely you feel, because you're finally home. Healing from emotional wounds creates space for authentic relationships. Until you begin to acknowledge and heal the pain you carry, you're not really engaging with people from a place of truth. You're engaging from your wounds. Every unresolved hurt, every betrayal you never processed, every time you were rejected, abandoned, or unseen, those experiences shape the way you relate to others. They create invisible filters through which you interpret other people's actions, even when those people have nothing to do with your past. And without realizing it, your wounds start to make your choices for you. Maybe you keep people at arm's length because getting close feels dangerous. Maybe you cling too tightly because you're terrified of being left again. Maybe you try to be everything for everyone so no one has a reason to walk away. These defense mechanisms aren't flaws, they're survival strategies. At one point, they protected you. They helped you navigate a painful world with the tools you had. But as you grow, they start to suffocate you. What once kept you safe now keeps you stuck. You can't build something real on top of something unresolved. Emotional wounds fester when ignored. They turn into resentment, self-sabotage, fear of intimacy, codependency, chronic anxiety. They distort the way you see yourself and others. You might start believing that you're too much or not enough, that people can't be trusted, that love always ends in pain. And the tragedy is, you begin to attract relationships that confirm these beliefs. Not because you want pain, but because it's familiar, because your unhealed parts crave what they know, even when it hurts. Healing is not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't affect you. It's about finally facing it, sitting with the discomfort, letting the buried emotions come up instead of pushing them down. It's about giving yourself the validation you never received. It's grieving the love you didn't get, the apologies that never came, the time you can't get back. And it's incredibly hard. Healing asks you to revisit the very pain you've spent your whole life trying to outrun. But it's also the only way to be free, because once you begin to heal, something profound starts to happen. You become more emotionally available. You stop projecting your pain onto new people. You start seeing others for who they are, not who they remind you of. You respond instead of react. You no longer need people to complete you, fix you, or save you. You come into relationships with a sense of wholeness, not desperation, and this is what makes authenticity possible. Authentic relationships are built on truth, not performance. They require vulnerability, not perfection. They thrive on mutual respect and emotional safety. But you can't offer that to someone else if you haven't first created it within yourself. If you're still operating from a place of fear, you'll hide. You'll lie, you'll pretend, you'll settle, not because you want to, but because the pain of being seen feels greater than the pain of being alone. Healing softens you, not in a weak way, but in the most courageous way possible. It allows you to open again, to trust, to risk, to love without armor, and yes, that means you might get hurt, but it also means you give yourself the chance to experience the kind of connection that can only exist when two people meet as their full, honest selves. You begin to attract people who reflect your growth, not your pain, people who value your truth, not your mask, people who are also doing the work, who aren't afraid of the hard conversations, the emotional depth, the silence between words. These are the relationships that nourish you, stretch you, hold you, but you only make room for them when you stop filling your life with the echoes of past wounds. Healing is an act of self-love, but it's also an act of love for the people you haven't met yet, the ones who will benefit from the peace you're creating inside. The more you heal, the less you bleed on people who didn't cut you. The more space you create for love that's real, honest, and mutual, and the more you realize that the version of you who had to survive wasn't broken, just waiting to become whole. The people who truly see you can't find you if you're hiding behind a mask. So many of us go through life performing. We wear the smile that doesn't match how we feel inside. We say what we think others want to hear. We downplay our needs, hide our quirks, mute our emotions, and try to be easy, cool, low maintenance. Not because we want to lie, but because we're terrified of being rejected for who we actually are. And over time, this performance becomes a habit. We convince ourselves it's safer this way, that if we show up as the version of ourselves that people like, we'll be loved, accepted, and included. But the painful irony is this: when you're wearing a mask, the connection you receive isn't real. It's built on a false image, and no matter how much praise or attention you get, it doesn't reach you. It can't, because it's not aimed at the real you. When you hide parts of yourself to be accepted, you end up feeling lonelier than ever. Why? Because even when someone says, "I like you," or "I care about you," some part of you wonders, would they still feel that way if they saw the whole picture? That question never goes away. It eats at your peace. It creates a gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And in that gap, loneliness festers, not because no one's around, but because no one truly knows you. Authentic connection is only possible when you're willing to be authentic. That means taking off the mask, the one you built to survive, to be liked, to feel in control. And yes, it's scary, especially if you've been hurt before, especially if you've been told that parts of you are too much, too intense, too emotional, too different. But hiding doesn't protect you from pain, it just delays it. It trades the fear of rejection for the slow ache of disconnection. When you live behind a mask, the people who are meant for you, the ones who would resonate with your truth, love your weirdness, appreciate your depth, they can't find you because they don't know who they're looking for. You've become a distorted version of yourself, trying to be palatable instead of present. And the tragedy is, you might be surrounded by people who like the mask but have no idea who you are underneath it. You could spend years building relationships that feel off, friendships that feel shallow, love that feels conditional, because they weren't built on truth. They were built on a version of you that isn't real. But when you start showing up as your full self, something shifts. Yes, you might lose some people who were attached to the version of you that made them comfortable, but that loss creates space for something far more valuable, connection that's rooted in truth. When you're honest about who you are, what you feel, what you need, what you love, you start to attract people who align with that honesty. People who see you because you've made yourself visible, not in a superficial, look at me way, but in a grounded, here I am way. Real connection can't happen unless there's something real to connect to. Vulnerability is the bridge. It's what allows someone to walk into your world and sit with you there, not because you've curated the perfect image, but because you've opened the door. When you remove the mask, you give people the opportunity to love the real you. And even if fewer people do, the connection is deeper, richer, and far more sustaining than any number of shallow approvals. You don't need everyone to like you. You need a few people to see you, really see you. But they can't do that unless you let yourself be seen, unless you stop performing and start living as who you actually are. It's in that space, where you're raw, honest, flawed, and still standing, that the right people find you. Not the ones who want to shape you, fix you, or use you, but the ones who recognize you because they're showing up as themselves too. When you take off the mask, you may feel exposed. You may feel uncertain, but you'll also feel free, and in that freedom, the kind of connection you've been longing for finally becomes possible, not just with others, but with yourself.